How you going, my love?
I'm good, baby.
That's
Chilling
good.
here. It's Sunday night. It's quiet in LA and
Mm,
just just kind of taking in Sunday.
yeah, amazing. Um,
Yay.
Thank you so much for dropping on last minute. For those of you who are watching the replay, um, I messaged Kristen and I was like, last minute, you want to jump on now? And she was just such a champion, just straight on. So yeah,
I'm
thank
here.
you
I'm just chilling
so
at
much.
home, with this shelter in place. I find myself at
Mm,
home a lot, so any chance to jump on, right, as we all do.
mm,
Any chance to jump on with you and to share and to
mm.
talk about the things that we're passionate about. Like I
Yeah.
generally have space for that. So
Yeah, beautiful. And so I
yay.
would love to speak into, for those of you who don't know Kristen, she's fucking amazing. She's done a whole heap of work with
Mm,
men and women now, around sexuality and intimacy and sensuality. Um, so she knows a whole lot around this stuff. And I wanted to bring you on to just kind of have a chat around it because I find that, and by the way, ladies, if you're jumping on and you have questions around this area, please feel free to
seven.
ask the questions. This is a space for you to ask as much as you possibly want. Um, yeah, I wanted to speak into I guess the eroticism and last week on our other live, we spoke into the more grounded kind of, I guess, um, what's the word I want to use? The softer side of sexuality.
I think
And
so. Yeah, yeah. And it's kind
yeah,
of like more the totality of, like,
mm,
for me, I really love infusing, let's say, more of this kind of like classical tantric philosophy, like
mm,
into our understanding of sexuality, because there's really no separation in that. It's like
mm,
when we can really lean into accepting the totality of life, from the ecstatic bliss to the impermanence and the death and decay and like everything that life is and has to offer. It's like it's a mirror to our like our own embodied experience, like how can we show up authentically for ourselves in the full spectrum of our experience. And that's why I
mm,
really love applying this kind of tantric wisdom to the experience of our sexuality. I think it's hugely beneficial because, as I've heard you say before, like, everything touches everything,
mm,
and to have it kind of grounded and rooted in a really embodied understanding of the totality of life and all of its ups and its downs and everything in between, when we can really embrace that and apply that to our experience in our relationships, to that experience within ourselves, to that experience in our capacity to uh, surrender to what is, like that's the fullest expression of our sexuality, just as it's the fullest expression of the experience of life. And I really
mm.
loved how we touched upon that last week. And yeah, but I'm super happy to kind of even go into that more and see what that looks and feels like in our eros, in our
Mm,
eroticism, and in like the juicier bits of our sexuality.
yeah, and I love the language and the vocabulary that you have, because for me, I'm
Mm.
still putting words to the feelings in my body, and sometimes I feel like I just nail it, and then other times I feel like I don't have words for it. So your vocabulary is one of the things that I really, really love with you.
Thank you.
And yeah, you're welcome. And so I'd really love to, yeah, speak into the juiciness of sexuality and eros and I guess, yeah, for me it kind of is a whole big bag of like who we are and how we have originated and
Exactly.
speaking into, yeah, the juiciness, and I feel like there's so much there, and I'd love to know, yeah, what that looks like for you and how that sort of is for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the first thing that's coming through is that there's no real, as you were just saying, there's no real separation
Mm.
between our eroticism and our life force. And in fact, as I've gone like deeper into this journey and deeper into that realization that my ability to connect to the aliveness of life is very much how I'm relating to my sexuality. And kind of, yeah, really recognizing that there's no separation between those things, you
Mm.
know. So where we should take this, like my my eroticism, and I guess the comfortability that I have to embody and express it really comes from, I guess, the work, you know, like the work that we do, that we're all doing to unwind and kind of like first become clear on all the reasons why this isn't just a natural, normal, accepted expression in our society, and how we're creating a culture and a shift around that, which I just love and celebrate so much. And that's why I'm
Mm.
so excited to be connecting with you in this space. Um, it takes a lot of courage and bravery and resilience, I think, to be able to show up in our fullness, like in our the full expression of our sexuality, as I think this is so inherent in, well, I mean, both the feminine, the masculine. In the feminine, it looks really different, you know. It's so deeply connected and in tune with our ability to create and
Mm.
express, because this is the creative force. Like, this is what brings life into the world and is our sexuality. And so I know that when I'm like blocked in that it's so challenging for me to be able to express myself in other areas. So for me, like my eroticism, if I can start to, which I've been, you know, which I've done and which you've been, you know, this is our practice, is how to actually bring these two, like life and the expression of our sexuality, like tend to be societally, in our society, kind of very, it's demonstrated as like very separate things, you know. So being able to be conscious and, um, the word that's coming through is like graceful, or just like aware way, being able
Mm.
to like infuse that, like we can walk through this world as an empowered sexual woman, and yet being aware that sometimes the world's not necessarily ready for that. So there is this like
Mm.
beautiful, and I don't say this in a bad way, but there's a tempering that we have to do when we realize the
Mm.
fullness and the power of our sexuality, and then also being able to engage in a world that might not fully be ready for that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's extremely painful and we feel separate, and then the journey is again then going inward and understanding that, like, we get to hold ourselves in that, and we get to be in the pain of that and the bliss of that in every moment, you know.
Mm. Yeah. And one of the things that's coming through for me as you speak, is it's interesting because my practice also has been, how do I show up in the world in that? And how can I continue to show up in the world in that, knowing that also as I do that in the world, it allows me more strength to also do it in, an intimate relationship. And, when I'm in that kind of context, knowing that they're strengthening one another because they're not separate either. But it's almost like I have found it easier in the past to show up I guess maybe, well, it differs depending on, what person I'm with, and life
Totally.
circumstances, and all those kind of, um, situational kind of
Oh,
experiences.
it's
But
so dynamic. Yeah.
right, and so, like, I have, I guess, felt it easier to show up in the bedroom, in a sexual intimate relationship, in something that I can fully express, but then
Right.
bringing that out into the world hasn't felt so easy. And then it's kind of shifted, and I've been able to go, okay, I feel really good at showing up, in a more self-expressed way in this
Uh-huh.
context, and now not so much in the bedroom. So it's kind of, how do I know that the practice has been knowing that as I do one, I'm also doing the other as well. Um, and I think that for me has made it easier to continue doing the work and leaning into that, and knowing that when I show up now sexually more expressed in the bedroom and bringing that into the bedroom, it also helps me in, what my heart loves to do
Uh,
out in the
yeah.
world.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. I really feel that so much because sometimes, especially if it's a person that we love and that we're emotionally connected to, like that is
Mm.
actually the hardest, right?
Oh my goodness.
So I know it's like, whoa, that's actually the hardest because then, it feels like the stakes are higher to some
Mm.
degree when we're
Yeah.
really emotionally invested and connected to someone, and I really feel that, and I feel that often in the relationship that I'm in right now. And I think we can you've spoken to this and we can really speak to this. It's like, is it too much? Because I think both of us, right, as like these extremely
Oh.
vibrant, sexually alive women, bringing that into the bedroom sometimes is like,
Mm.
whoa, is this too much? Because
Completely.
it's right, because it's like all consuming. It's like
Mm.
fullness of our sexual expression. It's like it's gonna like cause explosions, and it's gonna like make the fucking buildings around us fall down,
Collapse.
right?
Totally.
So it's like, are you ready? Are you and
Yes.
often, and I think that also is what comes with it. It's like sometimes they're not. Our
Yeah.
partners are, the world
Mm.
isn't, and then we have to feel the pain of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the practice. It's like, oh, like the world isn't ready to receive that.
Mm.
Our lovers aren't ready to receive that. So how can I still continue to shop and not dampen the flame, the fire, the burning, the yearning that is
Mm.
our love and our devotional heart, and the fullness of that expression through our bodies?
Yes.
And it's this push and pull and this give and take, and trying to figure it out as we go along, and sometimes it's clunky and sometimes it's messy and sometimes it's painful, and sometimes it's absolutely fucking ecstatic,
Mm.
and being able to merge with all of it. And again, coming back to this kind of more tantric philosophy is being okay with all of it and being to hold all of it. And that requires so much consciousness and awareness and capacity to really just be in it. And
Mm.
that's the work I know that you do with your clients and that I do with my clients, is like building that resilience, that strong like energy, that energy body that like can process the emotions that come with our commitment to this
Mm.
work, and our commitment to our aliveness, and our commitment to our pleasure and our ecstatic vibration. So it's like,
Mm.
how do we build an energy body? How do we build an inner state of safety, an inner state of thriving, an inner state of recognition that, like, even if it's not received, because like most of the time it's not, in a
Yeah.
lot, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't say that like in a bad way. It's just, it's like it's the deepest work we can do. Like we've
Mm.
decided to really embark on the deepest work that we can do, right? The sexuality,
Totally.
it's like that's kind of like the final frontier, because
Mm.
that's what I realized is that like generally this, because it's the most vulnerable, it also is paired with the deepest core wounds, the deepest not enough, too much, all these things that are so wrapped up in the deepest shame, the guilt, the fear,
Mm.
and if we strip it all back, it's the fear of like death, of like being ostracized, of being kicked out, of being rejected, of being shunned, all these
Yeah.
things. So it's like when we go into, and that's why I love, like through all my journeys of like yoga and health and wellness and food and all these kind of the things that have led me, the breadcrumbs that have led me to
Mm.
this point. It's like, oh, this is the deepest. Like,
This is what I've
this
been
is
training for.
where it all, yeah, exactly. This is where it all sits, is right here.
Mm.
And so then being able to enter in a more professional context, well, firstly, doing my own journey inwards and hitting all these points, and then being able to then, hold space and cope with my clients, that this really is the entry, like this is the portal to our greatest awakening, to our greatest and fullest integration of all these wounds, these shadows, this stuff, this conditioning that we hold. It's like when we enter it from the place of our sexuality, it's like when we can go in there, and when we create enough safety within ourselves, and then the space that we
Mm.
hold for our clients to kind of go in there, that's the deepest, that's the deepest healing, the deepest integration, like facing what feels like we're gonna die and still being able to show up and still being able to hold ourselves with so much love and tenderness and expansion through the sticky, clunky
Mm.
process that it is. I don't apologize, but I've kind of taken this conversation into like a bit of like the darker realms, but like that's what it fucking is,
Yeah, it totally fucking is. I totally hear you. And it's so interesting, like, as you speak about this, because the nature of my work, it makes me reflect on my little bits and pieces and my journey with this. And, a lot of my work has essentially been stripping, right? Stripping in the physical sense, but also not as a stripper, but like,
I was gonna say like literally,
no,
or
no,
you mean
no,
yeah,
as a
which is
stripper, but
totally
like,
fine. But I was like, oh, I didn't know that about you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no,
No,
no.
but it's
Um,
stripping.
like physically stripping, like with women, like working with naked yoga
I get it.
and, all that sort of stuff. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
just really
Being naked in our bodies, like being so exposed and
completely,
vulnerable.
totally. And it's almost like for me being such a representation of this, like you have to be prepared to be able to be so fucking transparent that you no longer exist. Like everything is seen, essentially. Like everything is like stripped away from you. Nothing exists anymore. You as you are no longer are that way. And, I've been really able to see, as you have, how this has led me to these parts of like, holy fuck, it's just a death, rebirth, death, rebirth. Like that's just essentially how life goes. And what I've been
Yes.
preparing myself for is like death, like this big, big, big core wounding death
Yes.
of the ego of like, and I'm finding that it almost gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, but more fucking blissful as well. There is this, when we're prepared to walk through the flames, it's almost like the way I see it is like I have this fire in front of me that life is inviting me to stand in the middle of, and my brain's going, you're going to disintegrate, get burned.
You're
It's
gonna
fucking painful.
die.
Like, do you really want to go there? You're going to die. You're going to die. And there's a part
Yeah.
of me going, yeah, but you're going to rise like a fucking phoenix. Like, this is the transmutation of the phoenix kind of thing. So it's like, there's a part of me knows that it's like,
Absolutely.
in those moments, that is so necessary. But yeah, it is those deeper death moments, and I find that that's what we have to be willing to do. And you were speaking into the, we have to build a capacity and a resiliency to be able to move through these. And I find that the more we
Yes.
can choose these situations for ourselves, obviously consciously knowing that they're there, the more we can choose to have them for ourselves, the more it builds that capacity. And obviously, it's not, a deep dive straight up, but it's
Absolutely.
a
Yes, yes. There's these,
slow walk in.
exactly. Exactly. These little incremental steps where we lean into our edge and we soften.
Yeah.
I get this quote from this amazing meditation teacher called Tara Brach, and she
Mm.
speaks to this like leaning right up to our edge
Mm.
and then softening and leaning into our edge and softening.
Ah.
And that's what informs the nervous system, that you can
Mm.
lean into this and you're not
Mm.
going to die. And
Yeah.
I love that this conversation is just spontaneously and naturally gone there, like gone to the fucking death. And whether it's like
Mm.
physical death, ego death, dying in the moment, killing your belief systems, killing everything that
Yeah.
you thought you knew, killing the ego, killing the conditioning. Like, are you ready to burn and die to experience the freedom on the other side of that, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And it reminds me, it's amazing. Like, I follow a really wonderful, amazing classical tantra teacher, and I watched this lecture of his. He stated, like, he kind of speaks into neo tantra and then classical tantra, and he's a scholar of non-dual Shaiva tantra. And he said, often I get asked the question, what can neo tantra do to bring it closer to, let's say, classical tantra, or deep um, philosophical wisdom that kind of ancient tantrikas held. And what he says is, add more death, like in your tantric workshops, like, get real with death, like, add more death, because that is just as much a part of life and our expression as the living, as the bliss, and as the joy and the ecstatic experiences, because it's like, I feel like that's kind of the bridge, and so it's like,
Totally.
if you're only looking at one side of the coin, like, you're not really getting the full picture. So you're not actually getting the full experience of life if you're not actually also looking at and contemplating your mortality, your death.
Totally.
And again, that can be the actual death of the body, but again, like I said, it's the death in every moment. It's the death of the ego, the conditioning, the stories, the fear, the
Mm.
shame, and even like understanding that the ecstasy and the joy and the bliss, well, that's going to die too. Like, it's about recognizing the impermanence and the dynamic experience of life. And I just feel like we're
Mm.
talking about sexuality and eroticism, but that it's not separate. Like, it's the same,
Yeah.
because I'm sure you've experienced when you're, like, say, in union with a partner, and you're fully going there in the fullness of, like, dissolution of the body and dissolution of everything that you thought you knew, so you can merge with oneness with all of creation. You're dying in that
Yeah.
moment, like, fuck, we're going deep, but here we are. Like,
Totally.
But
Totally.
it is. And to just get more comfortable speaking to that
Yeah.
and to get more comfortable with the reality of that, like if you want to experience the fullness of your sexuality and your eroticism, then get real with the impermanent nature of life and get real with the surrender to everything that is. And
Mm,
that includes the full spectrum of human experience.
yeah.
But as a product of, I don't mean to be super like morbid, but as the byproduct of that is bliss, because it's the
Completely.
freedom of knowing, you know what I mean, that it's a journey and that it's changing every moment. And when we're so attached to, and I think this is so pertinent for women, we get so attached to having to look a certain way, be a certain way, have a certain type of orgasm, you know, kind of like
Mm.
compare ourselves to like other women, and like, you know, there's all these things like we should and should and should and should and should. And just being able to kill all of it, which
Yeah.
often means a death within
Yeah.
ourselves. The other side of that is so much expansion and freedom, and that's where we touch the the trueness, the absolute embodied bliss of what it means to be free and alive and expressed in our sexuality.
Mm. I love that. I love that so much. And I completely agree with you. And I'm just going to close my windows because we've got a nice mower outside.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it's really interesting. What's been coming up for me lately is that's almost happening on another scale for me again. And I find that this is the thing, right? We then there's, you know, like, or the big one is just only like a one-time thing. And I guess this kind of ties back to your what you were saying before around the resiliency around, you know, being okay to have that be a muscle that we build of being okay to die over and over again. Like something that I'm going through right now is death around again this person that I was, and I don't even know what that is. But yesterday I woke up and I was like, I don't even fucking recognize myself anymore. Like I don't know who the fuck I am. Like I'm having even deeper layers of body stuff come online of like feminine attraction, and I feel like it's like the universe is scraping the bottom of the barrel and bringing these things forward to die
To kill
again.
them, yeah.
Exactly. And for me, like these are things that I feel that I've worked on
Yeah,
already.
yeah,
But it's
yeah. Oh,
like,
same girl.
right? And it's like, I know I sat there and I was like, what's going on? I love my body. Like I really fucking have no, like I love my body, but then I was like, oh my God, I'm looking really old, like just all this stuff coming through. And that's when I was like, oh, I don't recognize this. And what, like, there's been something that I've been trying to hold on to, and I need to let go. I need to let this go. And I had this big grieving yesterday of letting go of whatever the fuck it was. And my brain was trying to understand what it was. But obviously, the energy of my body was like, you don't need, like, let us just do our job. Let us just
Purge
move
it.
this.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Move this energy, which is, you know, essentially what I gave space for. But that's exactly it, is not being afraid to allow this death. And a lot of us don't realize that we have already accepted death to some degree, because in our lives we've let go of jobs. That's a sense of death. In our lives we've let go of, you know, relationships and friendships. These are
Partners, yeah.
all deaths, right? And so I find that even speaking about death can bring up a lot of fear, but we're already doing it to some degree. And so when we can understand that we're actually already doing it naturally, then for me, it's an easier way to allow the process to come through, allow that natural cycle to move through us. And it allows me a little bit more grace to kind of maybe get my hands in the air as I ride this ride of like transformation and transmutation. And I love what you were saying around, I love that it's gone in this direction, because that's exactly it, is we're needing to be okay with the death in order to be able to embrace the totality of, you know, the power and the fullness. It's not even necessarily power, but it's a fullness, a
Yeah, yeah.
full expression of of what,
Life.
yeah, of
Yeah,
what the
right?
innateness of us knows, but
Yes.
consciously we don't necessarily know yet. Like our mind doesn't know, but our body knows and our heart knows.
Yeah.
And it's like trusting in that even more deeply, trusting in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And like you said, I'm glad you brought up the resilience piece again, because it, like I said, it takes work, it takes courage, it takes
Mm.
bravery, it takes community, it takes sisterhood, it takes support, it takes to be okay with this kind of like dying again and again and
Mm.
again. And but it's so possible,
Mm.
it's like coming up to that feeling of uncomfortableness. And even sexuality in and of itself brings up
Mm.
so much uncomfortableness in people, you know? So
Totally.
it's like when we feel that trigger, that uncomfortableness and this and that, okay, it's of course, as we know, and I'm sure all of your group knows, like, well, there's feel uncomfortable. Okay, let's look at that. Let's look at that and see what parts of us, again, have to die, or what parts of
Mm.
us need to be held and nourished and
Mm.
loved and cared for with tenderness and
Mm.
compassion and presence. And I think that's the thing. Like I think there's a lot of, I mean, we're talking about the kind of the metaphorical death and think parts of us, I think, do have to die, and there's parts of us that need to be held with the
Yeah.
most tender loving care and compassion. And even in that process, it's then it's what's dying is our relationship to those parts,
Totally.
to kill off the things that say that isn't okay, that it's there, and
Yeah.
instead welcoming it in, bringing it into the throne of our heart, and giving it a space at the table as well. I really
Mm.
feel in this lifetime there's parts of us that we have to fully digest and bring into us, and there's parts of us that we have to dissolve and shed,
Mm.
and so then we talk about this discernment. We have to really know ourselves at the deepest level to know like
Mm.
what's not ours and what we can fucking burn to the ground,
Mm.
and and the parts that we need to hold close like a little child with tender
Yeah.
loving care and
Totally.
integrate in that way. That comes with practice, with sitting with ourselves and all of it, with meditation, with not distraction and not the things that we use to kind of dull or soothe or distract us from the things that we're actually feeling. And that's so much a part of our sexuality, is it's like we can't disassociate when, you know what I mean? We can't like shut
Mm.
off or disassociate or perform or be something that we're not. Instead, like really being able to know ourselves at the deepest level, which
Mm.
is our sexuality, which is our life force, which is this energy of aliveness that runs through us. It's our sensations. It's what the body is holding and carrying. So when we kind of really just get in tune with that, and when the more that we know, and the more we make contact with those parts of ourselves, the more that we can trust it. And then the more that we can trust it, the more that we can lean into our edges, because we know that we
Mm.
have ourselves. And then the more that we lean into our edges and soften, the more we can expand. And the more that we can expand, the more ecstasy we can
Totally.
experience in life.
Totally. Yeah. I completely agree with all of that. And I love that. I love that this has, I love that this has been that. Like, I love that this has been this conversation, because I know for myself, when I got into sexuality, there was, oh my gosh, so many belief systems that I had. I remember I had so much fear around even speaking the word sex or sexuality, or even talking
Mm-hmm.
about, even consideration.
Mm.
Going to the edge of that and softening
Mm.
into those pieces, and with the space of, like, I guess for me it's been curiosity, and yeah, like, what if I just
I love
get
it.
curious around what this is, rather than staying stuck in my belief systems behind this. That has what has allowed me to soften into the things. um,
Mm.
and I liken it to traveling the world. That's what I liken
Mm.
it to, right? You go to different countries, you hear all this stuff, say for instance about Iraq, right? You hear all this stuff about Iraq. People tell you not to visit the country because it's dangerous and all this stuff, and then you go to the country. Yes, you might have fears on board, but then you're like, well, hang on a second, like, let me speak to these people. They're actually really beautiful. Or let me,
Mm.
like, this country is such a beautiful country. The landscape's amazing. Like, oh my gosh, I never thought I'd experience this. So for me, it's like, how do I take that approach to traveling the world to other areas of my life, in, for example, like sexuality? Just how do I travel sexuality
Yeah,
and
I
intimacy?
I absolutely love that because it
Mm.
is. It's going to countries where like we don't speak the language, the culture. There's different kind of like rules and ways of engaging with the land and with the people and
Yeah.
with the culture, and then but then being able to again like find that common ground and meet in a place where there's just like the purity of human connection,
Mm.
and whether that's in like culturally traveling a new country or in relationship and partnership with our
Mm.
sexuality or whatever. But I love that you brought in the word curious because it's like when we get rid of the shoulds and the shouldn'ts and
Mm.
the kind of these belief systems that we've inherited or that we've adopted or whatever it is, and stripping again that all of it back and just like seeing what's there, and that really brings in for me this idea or this phrase of like erotic innocence, like
Mm.
the
Yeah.
innocence, right, of
Yes.
of of going to a new country and meeting someone on the street. And I remember when I was in Peru, like these beautiful like children just coming up and selling finger puppets, and there was just such an innocence
Yes.
there, and being able to kind of like feel the innocence in our bodies and in our desires and our natural um, wanting to experience our sexuality in a sacred way. And so this term of like sacred sexuality, it's like it's so I mean, the worlds that we kind of travel in, it's kind of a normal phrase. But then sometimes I forget. Sometimes I do feel so insular in the world that we kind of like travel in,
Mm.
where it's just like an every other day term. But
Mm.
I sometimes I have to remember and like repolarize myself, where it's like, oh no, like most people won't use the word sacred and the word sexuality in the same sentence,
Yeah.
or erotic and innocent in the same sentence. Like those are concepts that don't belong. And so, like, again, having to kill all that off and actually rewriting your own story around, like, no, my sexuality is sacred and it's no different to my
Mm.
spirit. Like my sexuality practice is my spiritual practice, and my eroticism is innocent in its nature. It's this natural impulse that comes through the body, and
Mm.
it can be definitely used in very destructive and unconscious ways, absolutely. And that's something that we also have to be really aware of and privy to, because I don't think that, the world is ready for the, awakening of our erotic innocence. However, I'm so grateful to be in this space with you and, of course, our peers and people that are really pushing this reality, or supporting and really making this reality more of an accepted kind of concept, like, or an
Yeah.
accepted kind of like concept of like, actually this can exist too. And I think in the acceptance of that, and the awakening of that, and the education of that, and the dismantling of the systems that keep it so shameful and confined and secret and all these kind of things, which, I mean, we know leads to so much distortion of the innocence of
Mm.
our sexuality, and a lot of destruction.
Yeah.
And so I know that this is my why. I know this is your why. I know this is, in our peer group, this is our why, of like, how can we